And this is the first time I've ever done a show like this. So in studio with me today, Philip Sarnecki. Very happy to have you here. He is a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Kansas. Like I said, we've never done this before. I've known this man for quite a while. I'm happy to have him on here. He is the kind of man that we need in politics. I'm going to have to question why he's doing this in a minute. But having said that, I think you're going to learn about a guy today who really understands what this state needs and can make changes that are going to affect everybody in the state of Kansas. So welcome to the show, Philip.
Thank you, Cary. Great to be here.
So first thing I have to ask is why? You're a reasonably sane man.
Reasonably.
You have very successful businesses.
Yes.
You've built from scratch.
Yes.
And now you're entering into this political arena at a time when it's a little hot.
Yes. Well, I will tell you that is a great question. And I've spent really a couple of years pondering that, talking to people, praying about it. And where we've landed is, quite frankly, I'm tired of losing. As a Republican, I know not all of your audience out there are going to be Republicans, but we have lost, we being the Republicans, the gubernatorial seat the last two elections in Kansas. And that's a state where Donald Trump won 58% of the votes. We have not elected a Democratic senator in almost 100 years, and we have supermajorities in both houses, but somehow we keep losing the gubernatorial seat. And it's really the CEO job. It's a different political job. I've talked to a number of governors about this, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia being one of them. And, he mentioned to me, he said, Philip, people have a tendency to throw all these political jobs in the same bucket, Senate, Congress, governor. He said, but the reality is the governor's job is a totally different job that needs a totally different skill set. He said, it is a CEO job. It is the job of a business leader. And he said, all those skills that you've developed and built and acquired over the last 30 years, like that fits perfectly in the gubernatorial seat. And I think what's happened is these people that have run for the last two gubernatorial elections, they're wonderful people. They're very nice people. I've written some of them checks.
I'm sure you have.
But they don't have the skill set to really lead from that place. And that's what I believe that we've been called to do and what we're bringing into this role.
When you first told me this, we were having lunch, and I remember having a conversation. I was a little surprised, but I was like, you're really going to do this? And you were like, yes, I really am. And we had that conversation about why this is a different way to view this. And I think the fact that you're calling yourself the CEO, which is essentially what you are, and you're looking at that model, that speaks volumes about where you think this should go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at it, senators and Congress people, which are very important, obviously, but they basically debate and they vote. It's called the legislative branch. Well, this is called the executive branch for a reason. And you're running multi-billion-dollar budgets. You're appointing leadership positions. You're building leadership teams. You're holding people accountable, or at least theoretically, that would be a concept in government.
You're
right?
hoping you can do.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can hold people accountable. And, those are the skills that I've applied to my businesses for the last 30 years. And I think if we bring those into the government sector, very similar to what Donald Trump is doing on a national scale, that we can do a lot of that right here in Kansas. And by the way, there are a lot of governors around the country right now who had never run for office.
Glenn
Youngkin, Kevin Stitt, Bill Lee in Tennessee. There was Doug Burgum. You've got Pillen in Nebraska. So there's a lot. Even the Democrats have a few. So, yeah.
That's interesting because you mentioned that Democrats have a few, because they do. Mm-hmm. And those typically that are not politicians that are Democrat governors seem to have a different tact than the ones that are purely politicians, which is exactly what you're pointing out here on the Republican side of the equation.
Right.
You're looking at people coming into politics that have a very different perspective about what should happen and how it should happen.
I think that's exactly right. I think we're not bound by, the ways of the past, if you will, not bound by kind of the political, what's the expected thing to do in politics, really bringing an outside perspective and an outsider's lens to what we're doing. And I think that's what we can do to be bold and really shake some things up in a positive way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing I would have to point out is you're not carrying a lot of baggage.
That's right. Exactly.
You don't have.
I've never voted.
No, yeah, you vote in every election, but
right.
But you haven't been in politics, and you're not pulling a sled behind you.
Correct.
With a lot of political decisions. So this is a totally different model.
That's right.
The way you're approaching this.
Yes, I have voted consistently. I have no voting record in Congress or the Senate or what have you. That's correct.
Yeah, so. And that's to your benefit.
And we're also not, here's the other thing. When you're an outsider like President Trump, we're not beholden to the interests of, a lot of the people that I'm running against, again, many of which I know and some I know well, some of them have done nothing but politics for 25 and 30 years.
That's part of the problem.
Some of them have been running for 20 years and haven't won anything. And I just got tired of writing checks to people who weren't winning and were really caught up in the establishment, the political establishment. And I just felt we needed somebody from the outside. And originally I was looking at backing somebody like that. And the more and more I talked to people, they said, you're the person to do this.
You need to be the guy.
You need to be the guy to do it.
Well, you're the man in the arena now. Well, when we come back from the break, I'm going to give you a little bio on Philip and how he got where he is. You're going to find this interesting. In the third segment, I'm going to ask him to do something very unusual. I'm going to ask him to tell a story that I saw him do in front of a group of young people about who he is and where he came from. His name is Philip Sarnecki. He is running for governor. The website is philipsarnecki.org, philipsarnecki.org. We'll be right back after the break. Let me tell you a little bit about Philip Sarnecki. This is a guy, he's not a trust baby. Nobody put a silver spoon in his mouth. He bootstrapped his way up, started out. We'll get him to tell his story here in the third segment. But let me tell you a little bit about this guy because he's truly what I would call a self-made man. Philip Sarnecki is a Kansas businessman, family man, job creator who has built companies that today employ 1,000 people across multiple industries. He founded and led RPS Financial Group Services. He also, his leadership firm expanded to over 18 offices across the country, including 12 throughout Kansas, with 100,000 Kansas underneath that group for wealth management, life insurance, and other things that Northwestern Mutual through that program offered. Included in some of his other businesses, he's the largest national franchise owner of Strickland Brothers Quick Lubes, established in locations across Kansas, Derby, Pittsburgh, Fort Scott, Independence. And he is part owner of 513 Films, who have had actors like Mel Gibson in their films. And I've actually seen some of those films, and they do a pretty good job. Those are family-centered films that are a little different than some of the stuff you see rolling out of Hollywood. So to say that you have multiple interests would be an understatement, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of a business mutt.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, but I really spent 30 plus years, in the insurance and investment business, wealth management business. And we were able to, grow our firm across multiple states, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Missouri, Kansas. But just in Kansas, we had clients in all 50 states, but just in Kansas, we had almost 100,000 clients. We actually paid out almost $135 million in dividends last year just to residents in Kansas.
And you had $10 billion under management.
And just in Kansas, we had about $10 billion of assets under management. Those companies were sold as of August 31st. So this is my second day of retirement, quote unquote. And
he's going to retire like I do at 76. Okay, not.
Yeah, so we're all in on this. I mean, we really feel like you can't do this part time. We have a couple of our other businesses where we'll actually be selling as well. So it'll just leave us with a few, but I have great people running those, and I don't spend a ton of time on them right now. So.
Yeah, because you'll be spending all your time doing this.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about some of the things that we talked a little bit about this off air before you went on. One of the problems we have in the market in Kansas specifically is we don't allow association plans in here. We're not doing anything creative. That's not just in insurance, by the way. Right. We'll have that conversation a little later. But there's very little innovation. It's kind of like we're stuck in this rut, and this is the way we have to sell the ACA plans, Obamacare plans. Well, that's great, but why don't you open the market up to allow other plans to come in that are not part of that ACA model? And you mentioned some things that are going on in places like Florida. How do you see your vision affecting the way we provide health insurance, health benefits to people in Kansas? Philip?
Well, I think at a high level, we have two major issues. One, we don't have enough competition, as you just stated. We need to open it up to association plans. I mean, I see what you've done as an entrepreneur with gig care, which I think is fantastic. And we need more of that in Kansas because that will lower prices for people. It'll help distribute the products better, get them out to Western Kansas, for example. But being able to band together and provide for association plans and make it easier for smaller businesses to buy health insurance and to get started. One of the things, as I've spent a couple of years really evaluating, whether or not I was going to run, I talked to a lot of people, including some Kansas legislators, for example. And as a business owner who owns numerous businesses, I know the challenges and the red tape and the bureaucracy that's here in the state of Kansas to get businesses started. And we've got to do away with that. I was having a conversation with a state senator, and she looked at me and said, Philip, you don't even know how bad it is. She said, it's even I went through this long list, and she looked at me and said, it's even worse than what you think.
And people don't think that. Think, I'm in a Republican state.
Right.
We've got Republican senators, Republican congressmen, we've got a supermajority. But the bureaucrats underneath all of this are controlling. It's interesting because they're not elected in these offices, but they exert so much control and pressure that I think it gets away from the politicians. I think it gets away from the state senators, the governor. It's almost like it's impenetrable.
Well, I had a friend of mine who said, what's so attractive about you running as an outsider and somebody that's never been in politics is he said it's the perspective that you bring. And his analogy was, he said, these people that have been in politics all of these years, 2 and 3 decades, have done nothing else. He said, it's a little bit like a fish in water. He said, you have no concept what it's like to be outside of the water if you've spent your entire life in the water. And, maybe it sounds like a children's analogy, but the reality is I think there's a lot of truth in that. And so I think people don't look at things in a creative way. They don't, they're just kind of caught up in all of that bureaucracy. Because the reality is, there's a swamp in Washington, D.C., but there's a swamp in Topeka too.
Yes,
there's a little mini swamp out there.
Yes, there is.
But it's a swamp nonetheless. And we need to get out there. And I think without question, I'm the best person to get in there and shake that up.
Yeah, I think you definitely be the best person to get in there and shake it up because you're not a typical politician. So before we go to break, a little bit about, as an example, that plan that's in Florida that you brought to my attention.
Yeah,
Talk about what they're doing in Florida.
Yeah, so Florida's doing a Section 804 import program is what they're doing, the importation program, SIP. And it's very unique. They're the only state in the country that's doing it right now. We're doing a lot of research on it, but it really looks like Florida now. They're starting it at the public sector, so it's not going out private yet. So I think it's a little bit of a pilot program right now, but they're expecting to save about $183 million for the state through that program. And what they're going to be doing is importing drugs from Canada. And, sure, the drama's in the details, and, we would need to put something together to obviously take a look at that. But that's the kind of innovation that Kansas needs to be leading on. And that's what I want to bring to the table as governor, as the CEO of the state, is to be leading the other states with that type of innovation.
So let me give you an example. Wegovy, the weight loss drug, if you can't get it as by virtue of the fact that you're diabetic and you want to buy it just because you want to lose weight, it's $1,100 a month. You know what it costs if it comes in from Canada, New Zealand, or Australia? $88. $88 versus $1,100. So what's the common sense alternative? You just heard it. This is what I mean when I talk about thinking outside the box and having somebody run for this office that's going to make a difference, because they're not going to be stuck doing the same things that we've always done. When you ask the question, why do we do it that way? Well, that's the way we've always done it. I think it's time to get rid of it's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. If you want to get involved, the website is philipsarnecki.org, philipsarnecki.org. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. He is Philip Sarnecki. He is running for governor in the state of Kansas, and I asked him to come on this broadcast and talk about what his vision is. The website is philipsarnecki.com, philipsarnecki.org, philipsarnecki.org if you want to get involved. If you want somebody in the state of Kansas who's not a politician, if you want somebody in the state of Kansas who's the CEO and understands how to run a business, and you want to see what that looks like, take a look at what's happening in Virginia right now and what Governor Youngkin's been able to accomplish, and then ask yourself what that would look like in the state of Kansas. Years ago, I don't know, let's see, had to be at least 6 years or more.
Okay.
I attended one of your training sessions as an observer,
Yes.
and all these young people from college who were being recruited to come to work at Northwestern Mutual. And I watched you get up in front of them, and I'm thinking to myself, before you started, they're going to see this guy who is very wealthy, has very successful businesses, runs this whole show here, also runs Northwestern Mutual in New Mexico and Arizona, and they're going to see a very successful businessman. And then you got up there and you told the story. And I was thinking about that over the weekend before we came to the show, and I would say moved, okay, because I grew up in a situation very similar to yours. My father was a coal miner, okay, who then became a finished carpenter, self-taught. Your father was a janitor. So, Philip, nobody put a silver spoon in your mouth. Let's talk about your story and how you started and your family and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town, a little farming community, about 1,000 people. One of those places with no stoplights and one gas station, one grocery store. A lot more churches than grocery stores and gas stations. And it was a great place to grow up. And, we didn't farm, but a lot of my friends, either they did or their grandparents did. And I grew up, I had to earn any money that I wanted to spend, and it was delivering newspapers. My brother and I would mow lawns. I walked beans, which is a horribly miserable job for a 13 or 14-year-old. Most people don't even know what that is.
What is walking beans?
Well, yeah, walking beans, you get up at, 6 o'clock in the morning. And keep in mind, you're 13, 14 years old, 15 years old. You have long sleeves, long pants in the summer. It's blazing hot, and you basically literally spend 7-8 hours walking up and down bean rows, and you've got a hook, and you're pulling out the button weeds, et cetera. Now they kill all that with,
Roundup.
Yeah, right. Herbicides, pesticides, et cetera. The technology is a lot better than having a 14-year-old do it, but it will make you want to go to college. I can tell you that. But it also, it's one of those things. I hated it at the time, but looking back, the values that teaches around hard work and discipline, they're invaluable. And they became invaluable to me later in life. So my mom and dad met very young and got married and, then had me. My dad, prior to that, had been in Vietnam. And he went there. He had, I believe, 20/20 vision, if I'm not mistaken. And when he came back, because of Agent Orange, he was legally blind at night. And so even though he was trained to be a paramedic, he could do that part-time, but because he couldn't drive at night, he couldn't do it full-time. And so, he didn't have a lot of options for work. So he was a janitor for 35 years. And but, I saw both my parents. My mom worked numerous jobs. She worked as a secretary at the university. She would wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go downtown. Now, downtown was, extremely small.
Right.
It was like Gary's Pizza, the bank, the bowling alley, and that was about it. And then the donut shop. And she'd go down and make donuts, and then she'd come home and help the kids get ready and get us off to school. And then she'd go to her regular job. And then I'd oftentimes see my father as he worked all day long as a janitor. And then in the evening, he would come home and he would go off to work. doing work as a paramedic, as a part-time paramedic. So, I just watched my parents work really hard. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. I grew up in about a 950 square foot home with 5 of us and one really, really small bathroom.
That's small.
That's small. Yeah. It is small. And I didn't even realize how small it was at the time. We had a neighbor a couple of doors down that had 2 bathrooms, and I thought they were loaded, because they had 2 bathrooms. And again, you look back and I didn't love not having some of the financial resources that I saw other kids have. But I wouldn't change it for the world looking back now, because my parents taught me, I think, what's truly important. My father passed away last year, but they were married for 58 years. And I saw that dedication to each other. I saw incredibly hard work. Faith was always important in our family, and just the importance of family as well. And so, looking back now, I couldn't be more thankful and appreciative for my parents and really the whole environment in which I grew up, which was not a lot of money. And I have some stories. When we were kids, we had a white station wagon, and it had a hole in the floorboard behind the driver's seat. So my brother and I called it the Flintstones car. This was before the days of that seatbelts were really important and are really valued. And my dad would put a wood board and a blanket over it. But we would, we'd love to pick that up and kind of look at the road flying by us underneath. And if you remember those little rubber balls, we would kind of like dropping those out of there and then racing to the back of the station wagon and watching them go bouncing down the road. And then when we got older, when I was in high school, we moved up to a yellow station wagon. Things were a little better by then, but it didn't go in reverse. So this was the car that I drove in high school, was a yellow station wagon that didn't go in reverse. And, you got to be really careful how you park when you have a car that doesn't go in reverse. But, I remember I was really young. I remember, maybe being 7 years old, I'm kind of guessing, walk out into the kitchen and, my mom is sitting at the kitchen table and she's got bills spread out all over the table. And she's in tears because she doesn't know what bills to pay. And, I think why that's important is because I think that drives a lot of the way that I look at the working class people of the state of Kansas and what we would do to try to help. I mean, those memories are seared into my brain, and all of that is the lens with which I look through, if I were to become governor and to lead this state.
And that's a very different approach. Okay, your story mirrors mine in a lot of ways. We never owned a car, even with a hole in the floor.
Yeah, right.
But I get that, and your point about looking back on that and not regretting it. My father used to, he'd get up in the morning, come room, get up, babe, you're going to hit a lick. That meant we were going to go to work. And we'd be in for 12 hours a day. That's the way he worked. Yeah. So you learn the value of that, and that carried over. You started out Northwestern Mutual at the bottom of the rung. Where'd you wind up by the time you wound up leaving Northwestern Mutual?
Well, it's such a unique company because you're really running your own business. You're just kind of doing it under their umbrella. So as a 19-year-old, I had a really good friend, and they lived a very, very, very different lifestyle. Although their estate, their 86-acre estate, was very close to our home. It was only about 2 miles away, but it seemed worlds away. They had a tennis court, basketball court, a 10,000 square foot home, a lake that we would water ski on, and I got to spend time out there. And my buddy's dad owned an agency office, and was very successful, not just financially, but also how he controlled his time as well, and the importance of family, and how he was able to coach his kids and just be there and be present. And so I got to watch that. But I started as a 19-year-old, really was my first business where I was selling insurance. So I kind of grew up in sales, but I had a lot of success with it early on. And I needed the money. I had to, I played football for 1 year in college, but after that, I didn't even really play. I practiced for 1 year. I redshirted and practiced for 1 year. But I would, I needed money. I needed to pay for school. I needed spending money. And so as a 19-year-old, I was out working really 40 plus hours a week in addition to going to school as well. And then was able just to leverage that into eventually owning an agency office myself.
So if you wonder how that story resonates, you should have seen the people after he did this whenever he was briefing the young people who were attempting to come to work at Northwestern Mutual. In other words, nobody handed him anything, okay? What he has created, what he has done with the multiple businesses he's owned and the success he's had is the same vision he wants to bring to the state of Kansas. If you want more information, it's philipsarnecki.org, philipsarnecki.org. That's the website. Lots of information up there. You want to volunteer, you want to get behind this man, that's your opportunity to do it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. He is a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Kansas, and we're happy that he took time to come in and talk to us about what his vision for the state of Kansas is. I heard a rumor you're producing a book, writing a book.
Well, I'm working with some people that are helping me write a book.
Okay.
Given the story that you just talked about, a little bit about my upbringing and some of the things we've been able to do, I've had people for years kind of mention, well, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I always I'm like, when in the world would I have time to write a book?
I've heard that a couple of times. Never mind. Yeah.
And but as we started exploring this and it came up or I threw it out, people would say, boy, that'd be a great way for people to hear your story and learn your story. So we went ahead and started it, and it should hopefully be wrapped up in the next couple of months, and we'll have a book out, and we'll be able to take it out across the state of Kansas, and they can, in a deeper way, share, learn a little bit more about my story. We share a lot of leadership lessons in there throughout my career, and I think just life lessons as well.
When you get it ready to go, you have to come back on and we'll talk about it.
That'd be
so
great.
What do you see as here we are in Johnson County, Kansas, number 4 wealthiest county in the country. That shocks a lot of people when I say that because we're in flyover country, okay? Right. But that is a fact, okay? And you're at the number 3 most livable city in the country, voted number 3 this year after being number 4, number 5 the last couple of years. But our taxes are pretty damn high, Philip. I mean, what I pay in property taxes, we've got great school districts, but I mean, those numbers are pretty high. Yeah. How do you envision this whole tax question across the state of Kansas, and how do you see that impacting this election?
Well, there's a lot of, there's 105 counties in Kansas, so there's a lot more counties than just Johnson County.
Correct.
And, part of the problem that I think, and one of the reasons I decided to run is I believe that Kansas has been mired in mediocrity for a long, long time. We have not been able to grow our population base to speak of. We have the highest income tax rate of all of our border states, plus you can throw in Iowa and Arkansas. And those are really the states that we compete with. We also have the second highest corporate tax rate of all of those states as well. And then you mentioned property taxes, which in some areas are just completely out of control. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of that is obviously the decisions and is administered locally at the city and state or city and local level. But I think there are some things that we can do from a state standpoint as well. I think, you can use it as a little bit of a bully pulpit as well, and to be able to get those down. I just think the whole concept of paying off your home after living in it for 25, 30 years or whatever it may be, and then your home is paid off, but you have to continue to pay taxes to the government, is really, it's like you really never own your home. And so it's something we need to dig into. And again, we need to be bold in taking action and seeing what we can make happen there.
So a couple things. Number one, that resonates really well with those of us that are chronologically challenged, because there are a lot of seniors that this is a struggle for.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's definitely an issue. But let's talk about this. Why can't we attract young talent to Kansas? Why don't we attract technology to Kansas? You've got a skilled workforce. You've got it's a wonderful place to live. All these opportunities, but for some reason, we don't seem to be doing any of that. Yet I see these other states doing that all the time.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that are happening there. I mean, you mentioned Glenn Youngkin earlier. Yeah. I'm connected with Glenn Youngkin on LinkedIn, and I see, a couple of times a week, he's talking about a new business that's coming to Virginia, or a new business startup in Virginia, or company expands in Virginia. He is doing a phenomenal job as the chief cheerleader of that state for business. And, when you're attracting business, you're attracting jobs. We also, and we talked about this earlier, we have to make it simpler, get rid of the red tape and the bureaucracy for new business startups. Because if you do that, then you don't have to go out and give these tax abatements to big companies to get them to come to Kansas. You can get, the Garmins of the world that start here. You can get the companies that get started here and grow here. And so by eliminating a lot of that red tape and bureaucracy, making it easier for business startups, that's going to help with that as well. So it's kind of a cyclical thing, right? Or not a cyclical thing, but it's kind of a chicken and egg. Because what happens is, companies say, well, we need the talent, and then the students or the people that are graduating and they want to stay here and work here. Now, we do attract a lot of businesses, or a lot of students, but we also lose a lot of people once they graduate as well. And so we have all kinds of ideas on how we can get folks to stay here and help them build businesses here. One of the things about this generation that's really interesting is they're pretty entrepreneurial. And I think if you take the obstacles out of the way, I think we can get a lot of business startups here in the state.
And encourage them to do it and not try to make it more difficult for them to do it. Instead of having to jump through 15 hoops, maybe only 3 hoops, and you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's businesses are succeeding in spite of the state of Kansas right now. The state of Kansas is not helping new businesses succeed, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah. He's Philip Sarnecki. He's running for governor in the state of Kansas. The website is philipsarnecki.org, philipsarnecki.org. I think you can see why I think he's going to be a good fit for the state. I've never done this before. I don't do politics, you know that, other than it applies to health issues like ACA and some of the other things. But in this particular case, I thought it was appropriate. I think this is somebody that thinks outside the box, and I think he's somebody that can make an enormous difference in this state and move us down the path a lot further than we are today, and put aside some of the political nonsense that goes on, and let's focus on what it would be like to have an actual CEO as governor, somebody that looked at this as a business. You've got a model for that. He's sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This could be a model very similar to that. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Cary. Great to have you. Yeah, thank you.
Great to have you here.
Great.